No, not to my knowledge.
Do you know whether or not John was trying to end the relationship with Miss Reed?
Objection.
Do you know that, sir?
No.
Next question.
Do you know if there was any jealousy in that relationship?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I mean, I mean, Karen wouldn't let, I mean, they did everything together, a lot of things together. And I thought at times, yeah, you could see, you know, she didn't want other women around John. I don't know, not at that, but.
Thank you.
You follow up?
Not further.
All right, Mr. Cameron, you're all set. I'll see counsel at sidebar for just a minute, please.
All right, can I get a 5x5? Anybody hear my voice? Of course, you know what's happening now, folks. If you're a law nerd, you know this is the dreaded sidebar, right? This is where they're going to bring the prosecution and the defense up, in theory, close enough to the judge that everybody isn't going to hear the discussion that's taking place. I said last night, if you're new to this trial, this is for law nerds a really unique way to get a look at individuals, or in this case, to get a look at a really, really biased judge. I was about to say crooked. I don't know that Bev is crooked. I mean, I have my theories. I talked about them last night. But one thing is to be sure, all of the decisions that you're going to hear when people say, I object, you're going to hear a hell of a lot of sustains from the judge vis-a-vis the defense. Right? They're not gonna hook the defense up at all on this. The prosecution is going to get everything they want. Every time there's anything that she looks unhappy. Anytime the defense wants to bring something in, Bev is going to block it like her job and her life depends on it. Now, who knows? Maybe it does. Right? Maybe she really does know where all the bodies are buried. There have been jokes made by a lot of people throughout the first trial about just how in the tank this woman was. Allegedly, there were comments made when people said that, what's going to happen with the judge, and they made jokes to the fact that she knows where the body's buried. Literally, she'd be the one that you went to if you had to get rid of a body. So this is, I don't know, it's a little disturbing. It's probably a lot more disturbing if your name is Karen Reed. Right. But there are people who will tell you that the Northeast is pretty rife with this kind of stuff. And sadly, I think that there's probably a little bit of truth to that. If you happen to have any kind of disorder that messes with your eyes, you might not want to look at the ceiling fan that they decide to put up there every time they go to sidebar. When we do sidebars, you're normally going to get, or long recesses and things like that. The first trial, that's not what they did. In the second trial, they seem to be focusing in quite a bit on, sorry, woman looked really familiar. Hopefully we're going to be able to keep this feed a while, and hopefully we some of the people that we lost will find us back. I hate it when that happens, but I will say this: it's not. This one happens not to be Spanx Calhoun's fault. This one's completely on me. Squirrel, be nice to your sister. Squirrel just slapped the crap out of Katy Perry, and all she wanted to do was look in the window. See, Squirrel's the big cat. If you get in Squirrel's way, she's going to give you a slap. You all right, Katie? Sometimes Squirrel can be a little grumpy this early in the morning. I feel her pain. I feel her pain. Do. Sorry. Do. Yeah, Spanky, do me a favor. If there are people on the other feed, will you tell them we're over here? I just looked and saw somebody that's over there going, where is everyone? If you can pop over there and just tell people that, maybe put up a comment or something that says we're live on this one. I don't want to take it down.
Please.
I don't, because that was the hello and all. But we're getting back from sidebar. So let's get back into business. And we'll, I promise I'm going to get back to the Queen's English. There will be diction. I promise. I'm not gonna. I'll use our words. I promise. Kristen Melinda, the kid cats are out of control. They really are.
Parliament, please.
Sure, you can have a seat.
Little downtime. Little downtime.
Stand however you're
Let's
most
get it.
comfortable today. Just do whatever you need to do, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, everyone.
Sir, yesterday we talked about downloading phones and making what you called extractions.
Yes.
And from that data, you could create different types of reports.
So have Detective Guarino say his name again, please.
I'm sorry. Again, for the record, could you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Nicholas Guarino, Guarino.
Thank you.
Sir, you mentioned yesterday that you downloaded.
Always a little
number of
freaked out when
phones.
someone's
Were
on
you
the stand
involved
that's
in the
not
process
Irish.
of
Kind of
downloading
been that
number
kind of
of
trial,
phones?
hasn't it?
That's
I'm an
correct.
Italian guy.
Explain to us that after you have the data analyzed, you can pinpoint certain items that you may want to put in a document.
Yeah. So the extractions into a program of our choosing, Cellbrite is the most commonly used, and then we can take call logs or text messages, any information that the investigator is looking for.
When you downloaded Mr. O'Keefe's phone and you downloaded the defendant's phone, did you try to create, or did you create a report through Cellbrite, the software, that would show you all of Mr. O'Keefe's call logs?
Yes, I did.
And when I use the term call logs, what does that mean?
The call logs are the calls that the phone receives.
How do you create a report from Cellbrite? Can you just walk us through that process briefly?
Yep. So in the program, you can go in and select the calls from it and export it into different formats: PDF, XML, HTML, or you can create a portable case and extract them all as a portable case that we would see on my computer.
It's worse in real life, Kristen Melinda. I promise.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Wine. A little bit more. Good to see you. Welcome to the patty.
Showing you
All
a
right.
document of Mr. O'Keefe's call logs. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is it?
It is the call logs. Just want to make sure it's between John O'Keefe and the defendant from, so let's see the dates, the 28th, January 28th, 2022 to January 29th, 2022.
Yeah, this guy's got to be.
All the phone calls from his phone data, the calls between those two parties that night.
Yes, that's what I created.
I'd like to move this as an exhibit, please.
Okay.
If I could, Your Honor, just want to compare it. It never made sense to me, the court reporters that just talk into that stuff. Like, couldn't you just use a microphone? Why do you need a person to repeat what they just heard? Can you just set a microphone there and let it go? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The ones that type are fascinating to me.
Okay.
Court reporters are wizards. I mean, those keyboards have words in shorthand. If you looked at it, you'd have no idea what to do with it. It's one of the most confusing things I've ever seen. I dated a girl a long time ago. Actually, I was engaged to a girl a long time ago that was a court reporter for a little bit. Nice girl.
You captured all of the phone calls between two parties on that last document. Can you also do that with chats?
Yes, that is true.
We knew you were a criminal, Kristen Melinda.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Did you create a document of chats between the phones of the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe for after midnight for the evening hours of January 29, 2002?
Yes, I did.
May I approach?
Yes.
You recognize that document, sir?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell us what that is?
These are the texts from the defendant to John O'Keefe. Yes.
For January 29, 2022?
Yes, that's correct. So I'm sorry.
Since this cat's opening statement, he has had his voice so low.
Thank you.
I mean, I realize that the people in the court can hear him, but it's annoying for all of us trying to get entertainment out of this. By way of full disclosure, I'm kind of rooting against this cat. I'm in the tank for Karen Reed somewhat. I'm not saying that she's innocent.
Did you
I'm saying that she
identify
tried
or
to screw her.
specify chat messages between John O'Keefe and a person named Jen McCabe?
Yes, I did.
Did you create a Cellbrite report?
Yes, I did.
May I approach?
Yes.
Ah, come on now. Ah, come on now. Come on now.
It's sidebar? No. Just the two of them? Yes, go ahead.
They're going to spend a lot of time at sidebar. Trust me. There's going to be a lot of that going on. And I'm not trying to be a cynic, but when a judge is trying to keep crap out of a trial, then you have a lot of sidebars. And Auntie Bev is doing everything.
Sir, I'm handing you a document. Do you recognize it?
Yes. This is the text messages between John O'Keefe and Jen McCabe on 29th on January 29th, 2022.
And this is through a search of Cellbrite. You match their data, pull up all of their conversations.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. I move to introduce this, please, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
25.
Similarly to the chats, did you do the same with calls between Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. McCabe?
Yes, I did.
For a guy that does this for a living, he looks
Yeah,
really
Your Honor.
uncomfortable on the stand, doesn't he? Guy looks miserable.
showing you a document, sir. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, this is the call log between John O'Keefe and Jen McCabe for, just want to make sure I get all the dates correct, just for January 29th, 2022.
Honestly, you got to check the dates. The last day the guy was alive. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
6/26.
what are you doing, Katie?
Did you do a file extraction and a report on all chats between the phones of John O'Keefe and the defendant for a period of time?
Yes, I did.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
There really is a lot of pomp and circumstance, isn't there? Hey, can we approach?
Yes, this is the text messages between John O'Keefe and the defendant from January 28th to January 29th, 2022.
Once again, the only time period it could have been because he was dead the following day,
Mr. Lessie?
the night in question.
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right.
27.
I have 2 criminal cats destroying my office as we speak.
Did you have an opportunity to make a report from some of the data from the defendant's phone from January 29, 2022?
Jane Aldrich, it is always an honor to have you here.
Reports from the defendant's phone.
What's a call log report?
Again, the call log report is the calls that the party makes to another phone. So it's going to show everyone they've called or attempted to call.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to take a look at this document. Do you recognize it?
Yes,
And could you tell the jury what it is?
it's the call log from the defendant's phone for January 29th, 2022. It looks like everyone she called.
Introduce this as an exhibit, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if this guy just knows that the defense is going to kick the hell out of him, but he looks so uncomfortable to me. For a guy who's a prosecution expert, like this is a person who lives on the stand
The
testifying.
entire call log of calls to anybody and everybody to and from for that period of time.
Yes,
That's fair to say?
yes, that's correct.
And then can you further isolate calls between just two parties?
Yes, you can. You can search by phone number or name.
And did you do that with the defendant's records for some parties?
Yes, I did.
Did you isolate phone calls between the defendant and Ms. McCabe for the evening of January 29, 2022?
Yes, I did.
May I approach?
Yes.
Criminal Cats would be a great name for a band, Kristen Melinda, 1980s band.
Recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's the phone calls from the defendant and Jennifer McCabe, January 29, 2022.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to move this into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you.
29.
Did you isolate calls between the defendant and Ms. Roberts for the night of January 29, 22?
Yes, I did.
Can I see the last exhibit, please? Thank you, sir.
Stand for truth. Is that a legitimate question or are you just being an asshat?
Can I ask you to take a look at that document? Do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
Could you share with the jury what it is?
Yep. It's the call logs between the defendant and Carrie Roberts for January 29th, 2022. Yes,
That's a report you created.
yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move this into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
A legit question is they have decided that the content that they like to watch is no longer the content that we make on the Lifeboat. They prefer hate, for real. In fact, it's funny because Noise
Did you
Opera,
have an opportunity
Seventh, some
to
people that you were picking
isolate
specifically by
and
name now follow someone
produce
that
a report
spent
for
4
all
years telling the
chats
world that I
between
was
the
a piece of
defendant
shit and a
and
scumbag.
Ms. Roberts for the night of
They've decided that this guy that they
January
used to hate is now a good dude.
29,
So God bless
2022.
them. I hope they have a really
Yes, I
great
do.
time.
May
Now
I
we're going to
approach,
go back to the show.
Yes.
Sorry.
So I'm handing you a document. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And could you share with the jury what that is?
This is text messages between the defendant and Kerry Roberts on January 29th, 2022.
So we'll get some evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. Jurors, this is the way we have to put evidence in cases in Massachusetts, okay?
I was going to say something similar, except what I was going to say is if you did away with all this BS, it would be a 7-day trial. But there is so much time spent making sure that everything is, you'll hear them say a lot, we're on the record.
So do you
and
have an
the-
opportunity to
everything has to be
identify
put into writing on the
a
record.
text message or a chat between the defendant and a person by the name of Ingrid on the morning of January 29th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
May I approach?
Yes.
When it's all said and done, it might take 5 hours, right, to push out 3 or 4 minutes worth of actual dialogue back and forth between the person you have on the stand and the person trying to get those answers out of them.
If you look at this document, do you recognize it?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury what that is?
Yes, this is a text conversation between the defendant and looks like a group chat between Ingrid Curtis and Bill Curtis.
So did you make that report?
Yes, this is on January 29, 2022.
Thank you. And we'll get some evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
32.
I'm not a prosecution kind of guy anyway. I think there's something wrong with somebody who spends their life, they think their mission is to prosecute and
If this
punish
is a
the
good time,
punishments.
if the honor would permit.
Okay.
But this guy's smarmy looking. I don't like him. Just keeping it real.
Recess now, and we'll take 20 minutes to half an hour. We'll see you then.
All right. Don't look at the spinning fan if it's going to give you any kind of a tell you what, we can probably do better than that. And we'll just do this and get rid of that spinning fan. So what they're doing right now is taking a 20-minute recess. And stand for truth, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but they're, the YouTube game. What happened to OG people? Charlie's a great guy. He's still around. There are people that become very invested in channels for reasons that become more than the channel itself. And unfortunately, we had some things go on, and there was a divide. Now, if you've been around, this has happened 3 times, 4 times on the boat. It's always the same people taking the same runs, and they're going to continue to do it until the end of time. I hope. I really do. But I talked a lot about all of this stuff last night. If you want to go and listen to last night's show, I'm not going to be talking about this stuff anymore in the future. I'm not. It's counterproductive to the mission of what I'm doing here. It doesn't move us in a positive direction. Now, one of the reasons that I haven't been putting up content is because I refuse to play the hate game. You guys might think I am playing that or whatever, and that's it's completely up to you, right? Discernment is a beautiful thing. It's what makes us so unique as creatures, right? It's what separates us so much from the things that have fur, is that we spend so much time using a form of communication that we're the only species on this planet that's capable of, right? I don't know, people that are out to get me. Makes sense. Well, here's the crazy thing. I'll give you a perfect example, right? And I'll, hey, Mr. Wolf, good to see you, man. And he is OG. I'll give you a perfect example just because it was brought up. I'm the Noise Opera. Is a guy that suffered really badly with hate issues. and hung out with all of the people that have been trying to destroy me years ago. And he came and apologized. He spent months apologizing and begging to have the opportunity to come back on the boat. And we let him. And he was one of the most positive and loving dudes in the whole world. And then he went right back and started doing the exact same thing. And I'll tell you, I mean, I could show you the screenshots. I reached out to him and said, hey, I love you, man. I hope that you find whatever it is you're looking for, because you seem like a really confused cat. Honestly, these are the same people that you told me were the most evil people on planet Earth. But you see, it becomes like a sports thing. And it's why I'm not talking about it here. For real. That's the end of that. Mr. Wolf, it's good to have you here. This case, to me, the most fascinating part of this is going to be watching Aunt Bev. Now, it's not a nickname that I came up with. This is a nickname that was used tongue in cheek when someone said, you know, well, what about the judge? And one of these, right? One of these people that are part of this little fraternity of blue that protect one another went, who, you mean Auntie Bev? In other words, it was like doing the nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Are you shitting me? This is our girl, right? She knows where the bodies are. If we needed a warrant to go do this, this, and this, we go to her. This was the attitude. Now, I'm not, I'm repeating. You don't have to like me or hate me for it. But if you watch this judge doesn't play by the set of rules that you see normal judges play in normal courtrooms. You're going to see a lot of objections sustained where you go, what the hell is the, and what I find unusual is, I don't know whether or not this has been discussed in sidebar. I don't know if they had, what do they call those meetings, where they go into the judge's chambers and sit down and talk about in Lyman, maybe they call that. But I don't know whether or not there's been some form of discussion about this beforehand. But very often when somebody says, I object, and the judge says sustained, you will hear someone say, on what grounds, right? Why are you sustaining that? You're never going to hear Alan Jackson say that. It's very, very rare that this dude comes that way, right? Hey, good to see you, Jeremy Fowler. Great to have you here, man. It's kind of a fascinating case study. You don't often, well, maybe it happens more often than we'd like to admit, but it's a rarity that you come across somebody that is this openly biased, right? I mean, this. And I talked about this last night. I've talked about this on some of the other shows, but we have a court system that is dangerous because of the fraternity, good old boy. And I'm not saying men, but because obviously there are tons of women involved in this, but you get this us versus them mentality. And the court isn't there to call balls and strikes. That's what they would lead you to believe. The court's job is to just keep it fair so both parties, the prosecution and the defense, can come in and have an argument, right? That's the idea. And then the jury will determine who's right and who's wrong. And the judge is just supposed to make it so that the laws of the land are applied in every case, in every question, in everything. What you get in this case is a lot of objections that the judge sustains that don't make any sense to anybody who follows law, right? She will object, and you're going to hear this so often. You'll hear it just today, right? But you're going to hear this throughout the entire trial, where what they are objecting to, they're reading right out of court transcripts from the previous session. How can something that somebody said that is written down on paper not be admissible in court if it was allowed to be in there the last time? Now, I know the legal eagles are going to go, well, there are cases. Absolutely. There are examples to that where if the first time it was brought in, it was a problem, then they're certainly not going to let you bring it in the second time. But what she's doing is she does not want the jury to hear any of the truth, right? What do you do if and back to finish my point, the prosecution is the entire court, right? The officers of the court, although they'll tell you a defense attorney is an officer of the court, but the prosecution, the cops, the judge, they're all prosecution. And then you have the defense. In a real court, the judge, although she has to work with the prosecution, she also is working with the defense. And at least he or she is just applying the law and calling balls and strikes. This you can allow in, this you can't allow in. That's not what you're going to see in this case. I'm sorry, you're not. And if you think I'm wrong on this, I'll be more than happy to have you debate it with me. And bring some evidence, bring some points where you see that somehow Bev is isn't in the tank for the prosecution. But here's why this is so wide open to things like corruption and well, it's set up to go wrong, isn't it? In order to get a search warrant to go into somebody's house, you have to get a judge to sign that search warrant, right? Now, you have to go in and say, all right, Your Honor, we're going into Tommy Scoville's house. And the reason we're going into Tommy Scoville's house is because we've been watching it for 4 months. And 50 people a day go in and out of this house. The average person stays there about 6 minutes, right? Now, we picked one guy coming out of his house about 4 days ago, and we shook him down. The guy had 4 grams on him, and he said he bought it there. The judge goes, okay, we could sign a warrant for that. Go kick the door in and go see if they're selling drugs. It's kind of how it works, right? But there are times when the person goes in and says to the judge, we need to sign a warrant on this guy Scoville. Yeah, what's the deal? Well, he's a drug dealer. Well, how do you know he's a drug dealer? Well, you know, there's a lot of traffic, you know, that goes in and out of his house. It's just tons of traffic. Have you caught anybody with any drugs or anything like that? No, nothing like that. It's a little thin, right? But you say, as a prosecutor, right, you go in there and you go, come on, Your Honor, we really need this one. This is a bad guy. What this person is doing, this is a bad dude. And I promise you, we have a lot of cases in the U.S. where a judge goes, all right, fine. Yeah, I'll sign off on this. And the judge signs it, and they're complicit. Now the two of them, right, the prosecution and the judge, have done something to screw over a citizen, thereby linking you for the rest of eternity. You broke the law. So the next time you come into court, and you're in front of Auntie Bev, in the back of your head, right? There's that, well, we kind of know the truth, don't we, Bev? Right? I mean, you remember that time you pushed that one warrant through that you knew was BS? It's a dangerous system because of the amount of power that are put in the hands of people that in theory shouldn't be working together, but are always working together. Always, right? The reason that the burden is on the prosecution, in my humble opinion, is because the deck is so stacked in the favor of the prosecution that if it hadn't been set up that way, nobody would ever be found not guilty. And this is a case that, well, I believe it's corruption. You can believe whatever you want when you're done watching it. But if you watched the first trial, it's fascinating just how hard an attorney like Alan Jackson or an attorney like Alessi has to work to get in a question. The reason that law nerds geek out on cases like this is because when you've got a judge that says, I'm not allowing that in, right? You can't ask that question. They're not saying you can't get it in. They're saying that question can't get in. So if you're really good at this, you can back up, sit there, and you'll watch Jackson. He's masterful. But you'll watch him regroup, right? He gets that look like, oh, here we go. She's not going to let me ask a question that's already been asked and answered in a previous trial. I'm reading it off a court transcript, but I'm not allowed to get this in. So he has to do this regroup where all of a sudden the questions and the entire thought process is going to change so differently to get the same answer he was trying to get the first time. This trial is going to be a hell of a lot longer than it's supposed to be because Jackson isn't an attorney that's just going to go, well, shit, they're not letting that get in. It's not how he gets down. What he does is he says, in order to get this in, I'm going to have to completely reframe this. I'm going to have to back up, and it might take him 45 minutes to get somebody to answer a question that should have taken 10 seconds. You're going to see a lot of sidebars. You understand the concept, right? This is when you want to discuss something that you don't want the jury to hear. And more often than not, it's going to be Bev that's saying, meet me at sidebar. And we don't know what she's saying, right? But my gut says it's things along the lines of, I'm not letting that in, right? We talked about this. It really forces an attorney to be really good at what he does. And we're blessed to beat hell, right? If you're a law nerd, if you geek out on this stuff, this is a masterclass. The opening statement from the defense. You understand just how screwed you are when you have to go back into court a second time. And I'm talking about both sides of the aisle, right? This is how they got John Gotti. If you go into court and you lay out the perfect defense and then you got to do it again in 4 months, you're screwed, right? Or a year or whatever. Because when you go back in, the prosecution goes, well, there's his defense. Now we're going to pick this thing apart. Jackson's a genius. When Jackson came out this time, It was a completely different opening statement. It was a completely different mindset. This time, when he came out, the opening statement is going to be, and it's a whole different tact. The last time they came into court, it was, these people are crooked. This is a frame job, and I'm going to prove it to you. There's a problem with that, right? Because now what you've done is you've taken the burden of the state, right? Or the feds or whatever, but you took the burden of the state of Massachusetts in having to prove that Karen Reed did this. And you got to flip it on a script to say, I'm going to prove that not that she didn't do it or raise reasonable doubt. I'm going to prove that these cops killed him. The cops killed him and covered it up. That's a pivot. That's probably the most difficult thing to do in law, right? You're going to bring in a completely different theory of what happened, and you're going to have to sell that to a jury, and you're going to have to do it with a judge that ain't going to allow any of it in. So when Alan Jackson came back this time, what he has harped on is a couple of very simple points. This guy didn't get hit by a car, right? That was the real hammer home point. Guess what? It never happened. John O'Keefe didn't get hit by a car. And the evidence is going to show that he didn't. His face is completely jacked up. He looks like a guy that got his ass kicked. He looks like a guy that got punched in the face a bunch of times. But the prosecution says that a car going in reverse, right, hit him at a speed of above 30 miles an hour, 26 miles an hour, some shit. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody hit by a car. I've had the misfortune of working as a EMT for a brief period of my life before I realized that I'm not cut out for that kind of work. People hit by automobiles find injuries and bruises in places you just can't imagine, because your body's going to do one of two things. If you're drunk, you get hit like a rag doll and you just sort of fly, right? You'll hear EMTs and paramedics and things say that God protects kids and drunks, because you would see car wrecks and you'd see accidents where you go, how did this person live? And they live for the same reason, because a kid's body isn't like mine, right? He's not stiff and hurting, and they're very malleable and they're very relaxed. So are drunks. So when you see a person who's drunk who gets hit by a vehicle, usually they're less likely to sustain the same kind of injuries because they're not tensing up an impact. But no matter how that impact hits you, it's not going to be centered on one part of your body only, like your head. They want us to believe this guy got hit by the rear end of a SUV, a large Lexus SUV, that the brake assembly made contact with this man's head, didn't hit any other part of his body. It's the magic brake light, right? It's like the bullet from the Kennedy assassination. This thing managed to bruise his entire face, put contusions on the back of his head that they say could only be caused by a step or something that simulates the architecture, right, of a step. If you're in the yard, right? I don't know about your yard, but my yard is flat. It has grass on it, and there are no steps that have right 90-degree angles on them, which, according to the defense's take this time, and again, this time they're going to raise reasonable doubt. They're not going to try to convince you that these cops did this. They're just going to keep pointing out stuff like reasonable doubt. If a cop shows up at a death scene, vehicle, I'm sorry, Mike, you're right. If somebody shows up at a crime scene, right? This person got hit on the front yard of a crap load of cops, right? Everybody in that house was a cop. Everybody in that house was a first responder, but nobody responded. Nobody came outside. If the cops didn't go in the home of a place where a man was found outside, beat up with a cocktail glass shattered nearby, you don't have to be a cop to go, maybe alcohol was involved. Maybe this was a drunken thing. Maybe it was a bar fight. So if the fight didn't take place on the lawn, had to have taken place somewhere else. You don't have to be Columbo to go, maybe it could have been inside the house, but you see, these cops never entered the house. And this time around, Jackson intends to prove that he went in the house. He being the victim, right? John O'Keefe entered the house. This is important, right? Because the prosecution throughout the entire first trial said he never entered the home. You realize how badly that hangs them, Because this time around, there's going to be all kinds of evidence to show that there was no hypothermia in this man's body. Now, Karen Reed had to hit him at what? Midnight, right? Shortly after midnight. They found him at 6 a.m. You spend 6 hours laying on someone's lawn, you're a popsicle. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the dead or any of that crap, but I promise you, he'd have been stiff with cold. 6 hours laying outside. And remember the puffy jacket he had on? Do you remember the guy from if you guys haven't seen the first trial, there's a guy that came in and he's already taken the stand. He was an EMT. He's taken the stand in the second trial already. I think he might have been the first person they put on. But he made references to a puffy jacket, of course, meaning something like a goose down or, the big down. They're filled with feathers. They're very puffy. It makes you look like the Michelin Man or the Stay Puft Marshmallow guy. John O'Keefe wasn't wearing a jacket that night. Didn't have one on. I'm always a little nervous when someone remembers a detail like a coat so perfectly that didn't happen. Now, I realize you work a bunch of cases, right? It could get confusing. You don't have the luxury of being confusing. Right? That can't go. This is a person's life on the line, right? This is a woman that's facing going to prison for murder, not for vehicular homicide or, boy, we made a mistake or I was really shaffazed and No, premeditated. They're saying she decided to use a Lexus as a murder weapon to kill a man. Makes a lot of sense, but that's what they're sticking with. Now, this time around, they've got new evidence. And part of that evidence is this thing keeps track of the temperature inside the phone, right? That way, if something's going on, I guess, and you bring it down to Apple, they can go, wow, you're running a little hot. Right? Obviously, we have radiator problems, put in suppressed on. Whatever they do to fix it, they have a way to figure out if your battery's running hot or cold. If John O'Keefe spent 6 hours outside on the lawn, the phone would have reflected that. You know what else would have? His body. According to the autopsy, the coroner said there is no hypothermia. You know what else the coroner said? This isn't murder. Refused to sign off on it. I don't see it. I don't see it. That's part of the same team. I guess they couldn't be bought. You know why? Because coroners don't sign search warrants. Coroners don't make decisions that you then are owned. Do you understand? I've talked about prison a bunch, right? Because I went there once or twice or 3 times. But if a cop brings you in dope, the cop's screwed. First time the cop hands you the dope, their career and their life is over. It's that simple. Now they own you. You hand it to the cop and to the inmate. The inmate might have paid you 10 grand or whatever for it. Doesn't matter. You got rich on it. From then out, you're owned. Because the inmate says, hey, I need you to bring another one of those bags in there. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore, man. Seriously, it sketched me out when I was coming through the metal detector. They went through my bag. It scared the crap out of me. No, you misunderstand me. You're bringing in another bag of dope, right? If you don't, I'm going to tell. We're going to go down there. We're going to tell them that you brought dope in. I'll end your career. And I got nothing to lose, right? I got a 20-year sentence. I got a life sentence. What's it going to do to me? No. And guess what? You came into my cell to hand me that bag. I'm going to tell them what time you walked into the cell. What'd you do? Toss a cell, search it while you were in there with me? You understand? Once you make a mistake, you're owned. Well, I think it's the same way with judges. I really do. I think it's the same way with judges. By the way, if you ever saw Training Day, remember that movie? Great movie. Denzel Washington, Training Day. But all the cops, the prosecutors, and all those people, they're sitting around having a lunch. And the guy's telling a story about some dude that beat the system by packing his butt crack with peanut butter. Right? By the way, you'll hear this story in prison. That you'll meet a guy in prison who will tell you that he watched this go down. I swear to God, every prison you go to, someone will tell you, oh, I was there when that guy did this. It's a line from a movie, but the guy's trying to pretend he's crazy. So when the judge starts talking to him about sentencing or whatever, he reaches into his back pants, pulls out a handful of what looks like feces, and starts eating it off his hand. And this is, the scene from the movie. They say, yep, guy beat the system. He gets a crazy card. He'll be out in 5. But everybody there talks about the guy that they beat a confession out of, or they did this. They're always talking about that where they fractured the rules a little bit, right? Because the guy was just a bad dude. Right? They were a criminal, and damn it, this guy knew they were a criminal. If they're a bad guy, well, then it doesn't matter how you get them, right? All is fair if the person's a dirtbag, right? Doesn't matter. I am of the firm belief that the Troopa Proctas of the world, right? Troopa Procta and Auntie Bev probably were way better friends than we would believe. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. It's not a bad piece there. Hey, how about smacking that like button? And do me a favor. I would like to know how you guys come down on this, right? Do you think Bev is crooked? In other words, has there been talk with this woman? Has Bev actually spoken to these people and said, I'm going to help you? Or is this just a case like I'm talking about where she has fractured the rules so many times for these people that they just feel like they own her? Or is she just another judge that always leans to the prosecution? And by the way, there are judges that always lean to the defense. There are. In the feds, there are people who are famous, right? There are judges that everybody talks about because they really are. And that doesn't mean that they're in the tank for the defense. It means that they're so freaking fair that it just sticks out like Wednesday in the middle of the week. Because when you get a judge that literally calls balls and strikes just by the law, it's a shock. It is. It's a shock. You know, if you look back through the history of the United States, there are some very famous cases that jump off the pages, right? Charles Manson. So one of those cases that we'll all talk about till the end of time is huge. It affected the entire world, right? The way that the Helter Skelter murders, as they later came to be known, the Tate LaBianca and Rosemary and Leno LaBianca murders, right? Took place on 2 different nights. Manson never called one witness in his defense. He did not put on a defense of any kind. And there are people to this day who say, right, was that because he really wasn't allowed to put one on? There's a book I've been encouraging everybody to read called Chaos. And if you read it, you might come to the conclusion that Charles Manson might not have been guilty for what they put him in prison for. Was he a good dude? Hell no. Hell no. And do I think he killed people? Yeah, out of his own mouth. There was one dude that he definitely tortured, and there's a really good chance he killed, right? Manson sort of came clean on some of that stuff. But we have a legal system that is so fractured that when the cases are over, we don't even talk about it. I'm telling you, look into how they prosecuted and convicted Charles Manson, and you honestly might feel bad for the guy. There at the time in California, if you were involved in a murder and you weren't at the scene, in other words, you conspired or whatever, right? You couldn't give a person more than 25 years. If they weren't at the scene, you couldn't give them more than 25 years. Even by Bugliosi's own, his own case, he couldn't put Manson at any of the crime scenes. He was not there when any of those murders took place. That's what Bugliosi said. Yet he spent way more than that in there. Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. That book is probably laying because Johnny Scoville's knocking it out right now, but it's a hell of a book. It's one of the best reads ever. It really is. Tom O'Neill. If you're not familiar with the story, the guy set out to write a book about Manson. And as happens, I think, with great writers, they don't always go in with, okay, this is how it's going to be, right? There are people like that, to be sure. They're going to write a book. Take the case we're on right now. They're going to write the definitive Karen Reed did it, right? Book. Or they're going to write the definitive Karen Reed didn't do it book. This guy wasn't out that way. He started to write a book about Manson, and he kind of let it go where it goes. And that took him to places he had no idea. The Central Intelligence Agency, right? The CIA, mind control stuff with MK Ultra. And I know that these sounds like the conspiracy theory rants of the QAnons and the people like that. But the truth of the matter is, this stuff went down, right? The free clinic in the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco was a CIA-run operation where they were giving LSD to people, giving it out. Charles Manson entered that facility. And I know I'm just killing a little bit of time here, people, until we come back on. We are on the record in the case of Karen Reed. Karen Reed is being charged with first-degree murder in the death of her ex John O'Keefe. They were still together, but on really rocky soil. Apparently, their relationship was not going great. Guess what? Doesn't mean you want to kill somebody. Perfect example. Since we can use me as an example, since everybody knows me anyway, right? And kind of knows my situation. If something happens to an ex of yours, right? Instantly, they're going to start pulling up every text message. Did she say some really terrible stuff? She did. If you listen to the messages she left for him the night that she supposedly killed him, where she's saying, where the F are you, right? You're a piece of shit. You're laying next to a woman, right? I know you, F you, I'm gone, F this. I'm leaving your, your kids, basically, because he adopted his niece and nephew, I believe. There's two of them. But she's like, I'm going to leave the kids here. She didn't. But she was pissed. We live in a world where we say things and we leave messages and you don't think about it. But God forbid, right? As soon as something bad happens, you start pulling back those messages. Kristen Melinda said earlier, she saw notes from somebody that, she had to see pulled up and in a court. There's something horrific about seeing things that you said or hearing things that you said recounted to the world. No matter what happens, even if they just play you saying it, contextually, it's gone. You're not there to know what the hell happened, right? Was Karen Reed really ugly in those messages? She was, right? But put yourself in the shoes of a person who goes over, right? She drives over to this cop's house for an after party. First of all, you close 2 bars and go to an after party. You're how old? I'm not trying to be a jerk, but good God. When's the last time you closed 2 bars and then went to an after party? Wait, in college? High school? Honestly. But there's in both of the bars, you can see these people on film and they're drinking like college kids, right? Shots, throwing back shots. You're a cop, you're in your 50s and you're throwing back shots all at the same time like you're in a fraternity house. Maybe I'm a jerk. I just don't see it. And I'll tell you, I've spent, unfortunately, too much time around people in law enforcement. And they come in a couple of varieties. There are great cops. There are, I promise you. There are fantastic people that go into law enforcement who go into law enforcement because they want to protect and serve. Somebody sent me a video of a cop the other night. And, it's such a shock when you see somebody do it right that it freezes you. But it was a video where it's like a DUI situation. The person is driving under the influence. They're not driving under the influence of alcohol. They're driving under the influence of something rowdy. And you don't find out it was a woman, and the woman doesn't come clean to whatever she's on. If I had to guess, I would have said it was a dissociative drug, something like mushrooms or LSD or MDMA, ecstasy, Molly, whatever you're calling it. But whatever it is, you've heard the term bad trip, right? Dissociative drugs, they call trip drugs because you take a trip, so to speak, from your normal consciousness. Like you get high on weed and it just changes how you feel. You get high on LSD and it can literally make the organism question whether or not the organism is real, right? It's a disassociation. It's such a strong drug that it causes you to not quite know what the hell is going on. But they're trying to put this girl into handcuffs while she's tripping her, what's off. Her tatas off, having a really bad time. And the term bad trip, if you're on LSD or you're on something like that, and all of a sudden there are cops in your face and you're trying to put handcuffs on you, it's literally a nightmare. And to see this cop show up and go, hey, cop, like shutting everybody down. He went over and he took time to try to chill this person out. He took time to try to make it so that this person wasn't horrified. If I had to go out on a limb, I'd say the guy probably did some shrooms in high school or college, or he had done some acid, but he knew, right? I promise you, the vast majority of cops would have enjoyed watching that person have a bad time. And I'm not being funny. It'll be the stories they tell later. Oh, she was tripping her balls off. You should have seen how scared she was when they put the handcuffs on. It's so ubiquitous that when you see somebody come along that goes the opposite route, when you see somebody that comes on and goes, oh God, this is just a person that's right. They didn't take drugs because they're happy. Where is this person? Let me see if I can help. It puts a freaking lump in your throat. It really does. It's sad that we've gotten to a point where we assume that the people that are in charge of doing it right are on the take. And I don't necessarily mean on the take for money. I just mean in the tank. Maybe that's a better way to put it, right? Bought and sold for the prosecution's always right. The defense is always wrong. How about this? Story of my life. But I have been in a courtroom, right? And I've been in a kangaroo courtroom which we would call in the feds the DHO, the disciplinary hearing office. He's a judge. The disciplinary hearing officer is a judge. But you go in and you tell your story. And I went in and I said, Your Honor, this is what happened. I took a piss test. Right? I'd been sober for a really long time at that point. I was no longer using dope, and I took a piss test, and I passed the piss test. I come back home and I'm walking into the unit. And they go, "You have to go take a test." I said, "I just took one." They said, "You got to go take another one." I said, "Okay." So I walked back down. I peed in the cup, and the dude took the cup and he went like this, and he pulled the label on it, and he went, "You're good." And he did this with 6 other people, and then he threw them in the trash. Then later on, pulled them all back out of the trash. So I complained about this
Could I see
mightily.
counsel for a minute regarding scheduling?
They said, "It's your word against a cop's. Who are we going to trust?" And that's the story of my life. All right. We're going to fire this thing back up with a sidebar, apparently. Getting everybody situated here. Hopefully, Aunt Bev has had her caffeine. Pop the toughie, build the bong yet. I don't know what Bev does back there, but it would be nice if she maybe let this thing get underway. We're about an hour and 20 minutes or so into this morning's proceedings, I think, give or take. And in that time, we've had maybe 8 questions answered. This is one of the reasons that these cases drag the hell on, especially if you have a judge who is going to force you to walk a tightrope, to do backflips and all kinds of crap to get testimony entered into the record that was already entered into the record on the last case. You'll hear her sustain objections to the defense saying, so the last time you testified, I object. Now, I understand because, listen, this is going to get a little confusing too because we had our trial already, right? So all of these people already testified once, right? Well, not necessarily. A lot of these people testified more than once because the federal government came in, right? Because they wanted to investigate how badly this case has been handled. And they ended up firing a state trooper, right? Trooper Proctor got fired. And not for nothing. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get fired if you're a Massachusetts state trooper? I mean, honestly, state troopers anywhere. There are very strong unions. They really protect these cats. They don't get fired. They get transferred. They get put to other places. They take desk work, right? They get them off the street so that they can't, but nobody's getting fired. Proctor got fired because of this case, not because of other crap, and they had 3 different hearings about it. It shows you how hard it is to get, but he's been fired. That's a challenge because it's a challenge for everybody because you testified, then you testified in front of the grand jury, then you testified in front of the federal grand jury. And by the time it's all said and done, you might have testified 3 times. And Alan Jackson, he's one of those attorneys that well, the first time that you testified, you had a 40-second pause. Like I promise you, he has learned this case in ways that, few are going to. And apparently, all right, we're done.
Okay, thank you.
We're back. Let's hear it, Bev. Let's hear it, Bev. They do this obviously so you don't see the jury as they come walking in, right? We want to protect the anonymity of the jurors who are going to have to hear this case, who will sign unbelievable book deals as soon as it's over. Great jury to be on, man. You want a book deal? Karen Reed is the jury to be on. Oh, by the way, first time they did this, 2 of the 3 charges they found her not guilty on, but because they didn't write that down on the paper to hand back to Bev, didn't happen. That's awful. Double jeopardy.
All right,
She's
Mr.
being
Brennan,
tried
whenever
twice.
you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Giggity.
Good afternoon. Just a few more items I'd like you to recognize. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Boy, he's a house of fire, this guy, isn't he?
Showing you an envelope. Do you know what's in that envelope?
Yes, the raw data extraction of John O'Keefe's cell phone.
All right, ask it to be marked simply for identification, please.
Okay.
Exhibit A.
I'm not a fan either, Amy.
Second folder.
Yes, the raw data extraction of Jen McCabe's cell phone that I created.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, ask it to be marked for identification as well.
All right.
Jen McCabe is a really lovely woman. I'd like to ask her out.
Trooper, you shared with us that you downloaded the extraction of the phones that you identified and you made reports based on specific identified features. For example, a conversation between two people.
Yes, well, I didn't do the extraction of Jen's phone, but I made those reports with the PDFs from the data extraction.
Relative to Mr. O'Keefe and the defendant's phones, you created a document that provided us the phone calls between them on January 29th.
Yes, that's correct.
And separately, you also provided a document that included all of the chats or text messages between John O'Keefe and the defendant on January 29th, 2022.
Yes, it also included the 28th.
Thank you.
Yes.
And in that compilation, did you put together or do you create or review a PowerPoint of those?
Yes, I did.
And what was the point of that?
Just to show the texts and calls in a chronological order, because that way you're not looking at two different documents, trying to compare and contrast the calls to text messages when each is coming in.
And did you begin that PowerPoint presentation with a call at 2:16:10 on January 28, 2022?
Yes, that's correct.
And are there additional chats or text messages earlier that morning?
Yes, there's a handful starting around 9:45 a.m.
May I
Yes.
approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
What about Haas Long to die in the cold? Wasn't that 2 a.m.? For those who are unaware.
Sir, could you take a look at it? Let us know if you recognize what's in it.
Big argument over that
This
Haas
is
Long to
the-
die.
The bulk of this is the PowerPoint calls and text messages, and at the beginning, there's the messages from before 2:16 in the morning.
I'd like to introduce this as an exhibit, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you.
Put a deuce in the chat if you think that the judge is
Commission, I'd ask-
working with the prosecution. If she's in the tank, give me a deuce. If you think she's fair, give me a 3. I'm not
Okay.
going to yell at you, I promise.
Do you have a hard copy of those for me?
It was provided. I'll see if we have another copy if you don't have it.
All right. I have, it's in here, the pre-morning hours,
She's doing such a good job
the
of
ones that we
using
discussed at
a letter
sidebar. If you don't
R.
have them,
She doesn't want to become a
That's a
meme.
copy for you, Your Honor.
thank you.
In that first trial with the trooper,
Thank
she had
you,
to read
Mr.
like 40 names. It was so funny. I'm with you, Linda G.
Okay.
Honey B, I'm with you. She's in the tank.
May we begin, Your Honor?
Please.
Could you first read the text messages from that morning to the jury?
Yes. Apologize if I misspelled things or state things. Start time. All right. It's a little different than the format I had before. All right. This is from Karen Reed to John O'Keefe. You have really hurt me this time. This was sent at 9:49:20 a.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant. I'm sorry, this has been an issue with me for 8 years. It physically hurts me to see everyone else in their life do things for them, and I'm forced to always be the bad guy. This is sent at 10:02:56 a.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, I'm not the same as everyone else. Most of the time, I try to do what is healthy/smart for them. More importantly, I try to support you in what you need. You just lashed out at me
So
and said
bad.
terrible things. I don't know how you've gotten to this point with me when I'm just trying my hardest. You made your point and continue to beat me down. I have a lot going on too. Physically, I am falling apart and trying to get answers and help. 10:09:49 a.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe. I am just your girlfriend. I am not a perfect parent, I'm trying very hard and sometimes treat them nothing like I used to. 10:46 a.m. on the 28th. From John
Welcome back,
O'Keefe to the
Jordan.
defendant. I know. I'm sorry for lashing out. I'm just hurting and struggle daily with them. Always feel like I'm failing at this parenting thing. I wasn't built for this. 12 a.m. on the 28th. The defendant to John O'Keefe. Kaylee isn't perfect, but everything wonderful about her is because of you. 36 p.m. on the 28th.
Honestly, I don't like the voyeur part of all of this, where you're looking into people's lives and hearing
From
this stuff.
John
Like, I
O'Keefe to the
understand that it
defendant,
has to happen,
Emoji is sent.
but you know, the guy's dead.
At
It's
12:59 on the 28th.
it's just uncomfortable.
From the defendant to John O'Keefe. It's true. I know she's her mother's daughter, but she wouldn't be so bright and successful if she lived with anyone else. 51 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe. Wow, Kristen just sent 2 back-to-back messages to not lose your faith in the kids. 28 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, or in yourself, at 41 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, there's 2 emojis sent at 06 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, no, and there's 2 emojis. Life can pick you up sometimes. Please be happy with them and put away your frustrations for the rest of the day. And be so proud of yourself, JJ. That's 35 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, that's what bothers me more than anything. Should have sent Peg's or Sarah's W-2s. We're all equal guardians. 21 p.m. on the 28th.
Just seems like he was such a good dude too,
From the
John
defendant
O'Keefe. I mean,
to John
you don't
O'Keefe.
know, but
Maybe you
from
can
what
call
we see,
someone.
it just seems like he was an ace.
1:55 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, like who? 1:42 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the
Well
defendant,
done, Jordan.
what time are
Good
you
for
coming
you.
here?
Proud of you.
1:38 p.m. on the 28th.
True story.
From John O'Keefe to the defendant, it's another emoji sent. 2:05:30 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, I don't know what time. Feel kind of out of it. Just trying to clear my head. 2:06:07 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, he writes, okay. 2:06:25 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, text me when you guys settle in later. 2:06:44 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, sure. 2:06:58 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to, oh, and it's cut off, yes, sir.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
That must be where the, so,
Would it
sorry.
be helpful if I take it out of the binder?
I believe it, yeah, it goes to the next one, so I'll start. Yeah, sorry.
With the court's permission, we'll begin the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thank God. I love a good PowerPoint.
At your leisure.
Okay.
Try to make it make
Phone call
sense.
technologies. Sorry.
Jordan, well done. Deuces for you.
It's from the defendant to John O'Keefe. I feel pretty shitty about how this morning went down. I know you said sorry, but it really stung, especially when I've been trying pretty hard lately. I feel like a loser turning around, just coming back over after everything you said. 2:10 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, not sure what you want me to do. I said I'm sorry and I was out of line. If you prefer to stay home, I totally get it. 2:16 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, things in my own life have been difficult too, you know. 2:17:33 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, I know. 2:17:40 p.m. on the 28th. At 2:17:45 p.m., the defendant calls John. The phone call is answered and they speak for 2 minutes, 22 seconds. 2:23:02 p.m., the defendant calls John. That's again answered at 1:00, and they speak for 1 minute, 2 seconds. At 2:24:17 p.m., the defendant calls John and the call is rejected. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, tell me if you're interested in someone else. Can't think of any other reason you've been like this. 2:25:18 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, nope. 2:25:33
Hey, Rich,
p.m.
good to
on
see
the
you.
28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, things haven't been great between us for a while. Ever consider that? 2:26:03 p.m. on the 28th. At 2:28:40 p.m., the defendant calls John. That call is rejected.
Mr. Green.
Put a 2 in the
can you
chat if this
explain
kind
to
of
us
stuff
the
makes you
difference between not
uncomfortable. If you
answered
feel like a
and
voyeur looking in
Yes, so
somebody's
if the
window.
call is not answered, that means the call rang out and goes to voicemail. If the call is rejected,
Kristen
that is
Melinda,
someone
you're funny.
actively
You just
hitting
said that.
the send to voicemail button to disable the call to stop it from ringing. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, kids are here, not in the mood to talk. 2:29:03 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, so you're not into it anymore. That's fine, but I don't want to keep trying and you keep treating me like this. 2:29:12 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, I'm trying to hug and kiss you this morning and you whack me in the face with a pillow. 2:29:59 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, last night you're basically like, yeah, what about when we talk about the future? So why don't you just admit you're not into so much anymore? 2:30:23 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, not how it went down, but okay. 2:30:26 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, can you please admit your head is out of the game with us? 2:30:52 p.m. on the 28th. John O'Keefe to the defendant, sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. So yeah, I'm not quick to jump back into being lovey-dovey as you apparently. 2:32:28 p.m. on the 28th. At 2:32:47 p.m., the defendant calls John. That call is rejected. John O'Keefe to the defendant, OMG, stop calling. 2:32:54 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, then why would you start with me this morning? 2:32:58 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, you're setting me up to fail. 2:33:05 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, you started a number of fights from your end. 2:33:26 p.m. on the 28th. And John O'Keefe to the defendant, I've explained it a few times already, not doing it again. 2:33:31 p.m. on the 28th. From the defendant to John O'Keefe, so you're not into this anymore. 2:33:41 p.m. on the 28th. From John O'Keefe to the defendant, not into fighting all the time, correct. 2:34:03 p.m. on the 28th.
That's a great
From the
question,
defendant to
Mr.
John
Wolf.
O'Keefe, if you tell me you're interested in someone else, you will never hear from me again. You can have all the space in the world. 2:34:11 p.m. on the 28th.
This is between a financial advisor who is a college professor
John
as well
O'Keefe to
and a
the defendant
adult
sends
male
an
police
emoji.
officer.
2:34:19 p.m. on
Does
the
sound
28th.
like teenagers.
From the defendant to John O'Keefe, then stops